Air France Flight 139. Entebbe Hijacking, 1976. Operation Entebbe. Chapter 1. A normal flight that was never normal. On Sunday, June 27, 1976, a warm summer morning bathed London's Heathrow Airport in golden light. Passengers for Air France. Flight 139 milled about the terminal. Businessmen in crisp suits clutching briefcases, families with excited children clutching souvenirs, and a noticeable number of Israeli citizens returning home after visits to Europe. The flight, an Airbus A300 wide-body, was scheduled to depart for Paris with a stop in Athens before continuing to Tel Aviv. Among the 248 passengers and 12 crew members were teachers, students, elderly couples, and young families. No one paid much attention to the 4 additional passengers who had boarded in Athens after the brief layover. 2 Palestinians and 2 Germans, traveling under false identities. Flight attendants moved gracefully down the aisles, offering drinks and blankets. Children pressed their faces against windows as the powerful engines roared to life. At 12:30 p.m. local time, the aircraft lifted off smoothly into the clear Greek sky. Climbing toward cruising altitude, conversations buzzed, plans for the week ahead, complaints about delayed connections, quiet prayers from those heading home. Everything felt routine, ordinary. But in the shadows of the cabin, 4 individuals sat with calculated calm, their concealed weapons and grenades ready. Ordinary was about to shatter forever. Chapter 2. The hijacking over the Mediterranean. Minutes after takeoff from Athens, chaos erupted. 2 hijackers, Palestinians from the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine External Operations, PFLPEO, and 2 from the German revolutionary cells, Wilfried Böse and Brigitte Kuhlmann, sprang into action. Guns drawn, grenades visible, they stormed the cockpit and seized control. "Sit down, heads down! This is a hijacking!" they shouted in accented English and Arabic. Screams filled the cabin. A flight attendant dropped a tray. Passengers instinctively shielded children and elderly companions. Captain Michel Bacos, the experienced French pilot, felt the cold barrel of a gun against his neck. The hijackers demanded a course change, first to Benghazi, Libya for refueling, then south toward Uganda. The cockpit crew complied under duress, their training kicking in to keep the aircraft stable while communicating minimally with air traffic control. Inside the passenger cabin, terror spread like wildfire. People whispered prayers. A mother clutched her young son, whispering reassurances. An elderly Holocaust survivor sat stoically, perhaps flashing back to darker times. The hijackers patrolled the aisles, eyes sharp, enforcing silence with threats. For the next 24+ hours, the plane became a flying prison. Food service stopped. Fear replaced boredom. The Mediterranean below, once a scenic view, now symbolized isolation and dread. Chapter 3. Landing in Entebbe. After refueling in Benghazi and picking up additional support, the aircraft touched down at Entebbe International Airport, Uganda, in the early hours of June 28. The humid, tropical night air pressed against the fuselage as the plane rolled to a halt under dim runway lights. Ugandan soldiers under dictator Idi Amin, known for his erratic brutality and anti-Israel stance, surrounded the aircraft. The hijackers had chosen their location well. Amin appeared sympathetic to their cause, providing armed backup. Passengers were herded off at gunpoint. Children cried in confusion. Families held hands tightly as they were marched into the old terminal building. The separation began almost immediately. Israeli and Jewish passengers were isolated from others based on passports and appearances. Non-Jewish passengers, including many Europeans, were gradually released in groups over the following days. 94 hostages, mostly Israelis and Jews, plus the loyal Air France crew who refused to abandon their passengers, remained. Among them were Captain Bakos and his team, who chose solidarity over safety. The nightmare had a new address: the decaying terminal beside Lake Victoria. Chapter 4. Inside the Terminal of Fear. The old terminal became a claustrophobic prison. Broken windows let in mosquitoes. Dim lights flickered. Hostages slept on the floor or hard benches, waking to the sound of armed guards shifting positions. Food was scarce, mostly canned rations and bread. Medical needs went largely unmet. The hijackers issued demands: release of 53 militants imprisoned in Israel and other countries, plus safe passage for themselves. Deadlines were set, extended, and reset. Threats of execution hung heavy. Inside, small acts of humanity persisted. Passengers shared what little they had. Some told stories to calm the children. One Holocaust survivor reportedly showed a hijacker his camp tattoo. Wilfried Bose, disturbed, replied he was no Nazi, but an idealist. Negotiations dragged on internationally. In Israel, Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin's government faced immense pressure. Families in Tel Aviv held vigils. The world watched, but action seemed impossible. 4,000 kilometers away in hostile territory. Chapter 5. The world watches and waits. Days blurred. Hostages marked time by guard rotations and rumors. Outside, global diplomacy churned. France, Israel, the US, and others coordinated intelligence while public anxiety mounted. Idi Amin visited the terminal personally, grandstanding for cameras, promising safety while secretly aiding the hijackers. His presence only heightened the surreal terror. Meanwhile, in Israel, military planners quietly explored every option. Intelligence from Mossad and released passengers provided crucial details: layout sketches, guard numbers, hostage locations. The deadline loomed. Negotiation appeared futile. A rescue seemed suicidal. But Israel had a reputation for never leaving its people behind. Chapter 6. A decision in the shadows. In smoke-filled rooms in Tel Aviv, Israel's cabinet debated through the night of July 3rd. The risks were staggering. A nighttime flight across Africa, landing at a guarded airport, storming a building filled with hostages and hundreds of Ugandan troops, then extracting everyone safely. Brigadier General Dan Shomron would command the operation. Elite Sayeret Matkal commandos, led on the ground by Lieutenant Colonel Yonatan Yoni Netanyahu, prepared. Mock-ups of the terminal were constructed in the Israeli desert. Rehearsals ran repeatedly. After intense discussion, the green light was given. Operation Thunderbolt, later called Operation Entebbe, was on. Chapter 7. Preparing the mission. Commandos studied every detail. They practiced breaching doors, clearing rooms, distinguishing hostages from terrorists in seconds. 4 C-130. Hercules transport planes were loaded with troops, vehicles, and fuel. Fighter escorts would provide cover. A black Mercedes limousine, meant to mimic Idi Amin's own vehicle, and Land Rovers were brought along for deception. Radio silence was mandatory. Medical teams prepared for casualties. The soldiers knew the odds. Many wrote letters home. But resolve was ironclad. Back in Entebbe, hostages felt increasing despair, unaware that 100-plus elite Israeli troops were racing toward them across the continent. Chapter 8. The Long Flight to Entebbe. On the evening of July 3, 1976, the fleet departed Israel under cover of darkness. The 4,000-plus kilometer journey took nearly 8 hours. Soldiers sat in dim red light, reviewing maps and final briefings. Some slept fitfully, most remained alert. Yoni Netanyahu moved among his men, offering quiet encouragement. The plan was audacious. Land undetected. Use deception to reach the terminal, eliminate threats swiftly, and evacuate before Ugandan reinforcements could respond. As the African coast appeared, tension peaked. This was history in motion. Chapter 9. Arrival in Darkness. Just after midnight on July 4th, the Hercules aircraft touched down at Entebbe. Ugandan radar had been fooled or ignored. The first plane rolled quietly. The Mercedes and escort vehicles drove off the ramp, headlights on, moving confidently toward the terminal as if an official Ugandan convoy. For precious minutes, the deception worked. Then, a Ugandan sentry challenged them. The assault exploded into action. Chapter 10. The assault begins. Gunfire shattered the night. Commandos sprinted toward the terminal. "Get down! Stay down!" they shouted in Hebrew, English, and French to the hostages. Inside the hall, panic and hope collided. Hostages dropped to the floor as bullets flew. The hijackers returned fire. Wilfried Bose attempted to shoot at hostages but was cut down. Room-by-room clearing was lightning fast. Grenades and precise gunfire neutralized threats. Ugandan soldiers outside the terminal engaged, but the Israelis overwhelmed them. The operation was a whirlwind of controlled violence, 53 minutes from wheels down to wheels up. Tragically, 3 hostages were killed in the crossfire: Jean-Jacques Maimoni, Pasco Cohen, and another. Yoni Netanyahu was fatally wounded while leading from the front, becoming the only Israeli soldier killed in action. Chapter 11. Freedom at Last. As resistance collapsed, commandos swept through, helping hostages to their feet. "You're safe! We're Israeli!" The words brought tears, disbelief, and overwhelming relief. Elderly passengers were carried, families embraced. The Air France crew, heroes in their own right, coordinated with rescuers. Outside, Ugandan MiG fighters were destroyed on the ground to prevent pursuit. The Hercules planes loaded with hostages and troops roared back into the sky, heading toward freedom via a refueling stop in Kenya. Chapter 12. The Flight Home. Aboard the rescue aircraft, emotions poured out: sobs, laughter, prayers of gratitude. Wounded received immediate care. Stories were shared in hushed tones. News broke worldwide within hours. Miracle at Entebbe headlines dominated. The operation became instant legend. Survivors were reunited with families in stages, some in Europe, most in Israel. The world celebrated the audacity and success. Chapter 13. Aftermath and Legacy. Dora Bloch, an elderly hostage hospitalized in Kampala, was murdered by Amin's forces in retaliation, the 4th hostage death. In Israel, national mourning for Yoni Netanyahu mixed with pride. The raid boosted morale after the traumas of the 1973 Yom Kippur War. It set a global standard for counterterrorism, bold action over endless negotiation. The event influenced future operations and hostage policies worldwide. Books, films, Raid on Entebbe, Operation Thunderbolt, and documentaries followed. Chapter 14. Human Stories from the Darkness. 13-year-old Benny Davidson later recalled how adults shielded children from the worst. Captain Mitchell Bakos became a symbol of courage for staying with his passengers. Survivors like the Almog family and others carried lifelong scars but also profound gratitude. One hostage remembered a German hijacker's conflicted humanity. Others spoke of the unbreakable bond formed in captivity. These personal threads turned statistics into a deeply human drama. Chapter 15: Reflection. Echoes across decades. Decades later, Operation Entebbe remains a masterclass in courage, logistics, and moral clarity. It proved that distance and difficulty do not absolve responsibility when innocent lives are at stake. In an era of ongoing global terrorism and hostage crises, its lessons endure. Preparation, unity, and the willingness to act decisively. For the passengers of Flight 139, it was more than history. It was a flight that began in routine, descended into terror, and ended in one of the greatest rescues ever attempted. A testament to the human spirit, both its capacity for evil and its extraordinary potential for heroism. Closing note. Thank you for watching this one of history's most daring rescue missions. The story of Air France Flight 139 and Operation Entebbe continues to inspire because it reminds us what determination and bravery can achieve against overwhelming odds. If you enjoyed this detailed narrative, stay tuned for more real-life historical epics. Subscribe, share, and keep these stories alive. Never forget, never surrender. Good luck and safe travels wherever life takes you.